Okay, thank you for your help. I appreciate that. Welcome to the Wizards for Hire panel. If you thought you were coming to some other panel, you made a wonderful mistake and you're at the place you really need to be. Excuse me, I'm Frank Morin, and I write all kinds of different fantasy. I've got epic young adult fantasy, historical fantasy thrillers, among other things. With me are David Butler and Quiana Chase. I'll let them introduce themselves, and then we'll dive into it. And like our assistant there said, that feel free to post questions. We'll start taking questions in a little while, and we'd love to hear your thoughts and see if you can stump us. Dave and I have a bet that no one's going to be able to do that.
No one can stump Quiana, that is. That's
right.
Of course.
Quiana, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. So my name is Quiana Chase, and I am a writer, but for my day job, I also work in a spaceship simulator. So that's where I get most of my, I guess, expertise with writing, but I also write books on the side. Right now I have one book published with an indie press called My Brother is Human, and I just really like the idea of magic and how it affects things. So yeah, That's me.
Great.
I'm Dave Butler. For adults, I publish under my initials DJ Butler. Last week, my 10th traditionally published novel, The Jupiter Knife, came out. It is about a cunning man, a guy named Hiram Woolley, who in 1935 is a Lehigh sugar beet farmer, and also uses his Grandma Hetty's traditional magical lore to battle the evil forces of the Great Depression. Published by Bain, but also Knopf, and in the indie space, various publishers, including Wordfire Press and most recently Immortal Works.
Very good. Excellent. So let's jump right into it. Today we're talking about Wizards for Hire, and the idea that, we think of wizards, we think of someone like Gandalf probably, or something like that, where you've got this, powerful being that wanders the world and, on the lookout for evil, trying to fight the Dark Lord or something. But, do they have a day job? Or are there instances we can discuss where, maybe it's a different kind of society where magic's more common and where wizards do have day jobs? So that's kind of the idea how we're going to get started into it. And so I'd like to maybe jump out and throw out the question of, what do you think about when the question of Wizards for Hire comes up, and maybe a couple of examples of either books or movies or stories that might be familiar, where we could discuss wizards that aren't just like a Gandalf that's just kind of wandering the world forever. So go ahead, and whichever one of you wants can start with that one, and then we can each chime in.
Okay. All right. So the first thing that came to my mind when I thought of Wizards for Hire is this book called Paper Mage. And I found it at a discount bookstore. I don't remember who wrote it, but it was super, super fascinating. It was like a magic system based on origami, and what you folded ended up coming to life. And the main character, the protagonist, is employed as a caravan defense person whose job is to create things to protect the camp, and a lot of these are giant animals or even illusions to keep everyone safe. And it was a really fascinating concept, and I highly recommend reading that book. For it goes into a lot of detail and depth, and you can really tell that the author thought about what the society would be like if, wizards and magic actually existed. It felt very authentic to me.
Very cool.
So I like to study magic from the point of view of real world practice, and then work that into fiction. And it turns out there's a wide range of patterns for how wizards in the real world get employed. Let me just throw out maybe 2 or 3 examples here. So there is a German magical tradition called Browker. I'm putting it in the text so you can see the spelling of it. There are still Browkers practicing their craft in Pennsylvania and Ohio. And this is an explicitly Christian kind of practice. In fact, Browker might tell you that he is not a wizard at all. He might say, hey, this is actually just a really focused discipline or a kind of a practice of prayer. But if your prayers have to have the same words and they also come with ritual gestures, and you got to make the sign of the cross over the part of the body that was wounded, and there are certain plants that you need to use to fumigate or to put onto the wound at the same time you're treating it, it starts to sound an awful lot like a spell. And what Browkers say about their own practice is they can't take money for it. It's an act of charity, and you can the various things that their prayers are good for, and it's certainly more than just healing. The most famous Browker, the best-selling book of magic ever published in America, was a Browkerite text called "The Long Forgotten Friend" by Jan Georg Homan, John George Homan. He had spells for things like turning away bullets. Actually, my favorite spell I've ever read is in that book. It's so great. It's a prayer you say for when you catch a burglar in the act. Okay, so the burglar is in your house. What do? The answer is you say this prayer, and you make the sign of the cross at the right moments in the prayer. And what the spell does is it freezes the burglar in place. And he has now two options. He can either repent, in which case the spell will let him go, or he can refuse, in which case at dawn God will strike him dead. So that's my favorite real-world spell I've ever read, and I've read a lot of magic books. So that's an example of wizards who won't take employment. Now, maybe some of them would accept gifts, so you could go and get the Morin on your cattle healed or whatever, and you would give the Browker a nice cheese or something. I don't know, but you can't pay him.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, here's another example I really love. It's the Cunning Men, or the Cunning Women and Men. The Cunning Folk is a magical tradition that we have recorded in England right up into the 1930s. Which probably means that there are cunning folk today, okay? And the profession of cunning folk arose because the officers of the king and other professionals you would find at court, like doctors, are very far away. If you're at some village out on Exmoor or whatever, it takes a sheriff a long time to get to you. It takes the court only shows up every other year. And if you need a physician, God help you. And so for all the things that those people would do, you turn to a cunning person. Now this is a professional that you pay. Okay. And these people historically, they're usually literate. They're artisan class people. So they're tailors or gunsmiths, they have a business. And out the side door, if you are unlucky in love or need to figure out who stole your sheep or whatever, they know the charms to accomplish that. So look, those are just two examples to say there's a wide range of patterns.
That's great. And I'm assuming, I haven't read Cunning Man yet, but I'm assuming that you build on that in your novel, The Cunning Man. Is that correct?
Yeah, so Hiram Woolley, these are the two novels that should be showing in my video image here, uses, as much as we possibly can, spells that we actually have recorded. He does magic that people actually claim to have done and written down, seer stones, dowsing rods, written charms on paper or on sheets of metal.
So you're actually drawing on actual recorded spells per se,
as well as the behavior of the people who cast them. Yeah, I mean, it's great, but it's an attempt to sort of be historically accurate in.
That's fascinating.
That is really cool.
Yeah. So for me, I kind of took a different take on the same idea. I've explored the idea of magic users and how they impact society, as kind of a day job or beyond just, walking out into the wilds with a wizard with a long hat to go do battle with the Dark Lord. I've kind of taken it a slightly different way in quite a few of my books. In my Petrolus series, my young adult fantasy, there's a lot of magic. It's based on rocks, which is a lot of fun. But the magic magic users are in all levels of society. You've got the lords and ladies, the nobility that get all of their advantage out of it, but you'll have a lot of common people too, and of course some of them are warriors and everything, and that's a major focus of it. But you've also got laborers. Some of them can tap their powers to get enormous strength, so they make great laborers, or they can get enormous speed, and so they bring messages and stuff. And there's a whole branch of the magic where they can there's another group that we call the builders, where they can unlock the power of these stones, but not for personal use, but just to kind of unlock it and make it available. And so they become the the builders, the inventors, and they start through this series what really becomes an entire industrial revolution. But instead of basing it on steam or gas powered engines, is based on these power stones that can emit fire or air or do other things, or healing or things like that. And it starts having a profound impact on their society. And it's been really fun to explore that, because a lot of, I think, traditional fantasy, they'll have the chosen one or whatever, and they go off and do battle. But, their magical stuff doesn't do a whole lot to, I think, the normal population, other than maybe make them miserable, when their city gets burned down or whatever. But it's been really fun exploring, how do you bring this down into society, and what would happen if you made things like that available. And it's been really interesting, because it can revolutionize things. And then you can start playing with that.
So that's fun,
Yeah, I really like that. Oh, yeah, like, oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Oh, please.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I really like the concepts and drawing from real life to come up with like different magic systems and figuring out how they would work in reality. And I thought it was really fascinating how you brought up how you studied like real wizards. And I really liked your insight on that, because when I think of real wizards, that's the farthest thing from my mind. When I think of like a real life wizard, I think of an IT person, because like, I don't know how this works. This is a magic rock that lives in my pocket, and like, I can listen to music on it sometimes. I don't know how it works, and I rely on like wizards and people who master technology to have it like function, I guess. And so that's usually what I draw on when I'm trying to figure out how magic would interact with a society, as I look at how different technological advancements that are accessible to like the general population, but yet the general population doesn't quite understand. I look at those and see how they affect like the general flow of our world, and I steal little bits and things and throw them into the stories. So
that's a great idea. And I think it's great, because I think we've each talked about, different aspects of the same approach. And I don't know, people listening that might be one of their questions, is how would I go about creating a magic system or a society that incorporates magic into the everyday life? And we could chat about that a little bit more and talk about, how do we go about doing that? And what advice could we give people to get that started?
If you read spell books, and these are readily available, by the way,
yeah.
It used to be hard to come by. It's readily available. Like real world stuff from Middle Ages, early modern period. You don't find fireball spells. Okay, the overwhelming majority of what spells you find are, I want to make someone fall in love with me, right? I want to remove a curse. I want to be healed. I want my business or my farm to prosper. I want to find out who committed that crime. That's mostly what it is for wizards who are dealing with sort of ordinary people. Now you get into and actually, Lorraine, I want to respond to your question a little bit. You get into kind of higher levels of magic. There is a tradition of magicians in the Renaissance who served the monarchs at European courts. Okay, the great granddaddy of books of Western magic is by a guy named Henry Cornelius Agrippa. And his book is, he was a German nobleman in the 16th century, and he dedicated his book to the Bishop of Cologne, who was his patron. Those books do have things like, here's a spell for bringing down a wall, here's a spell for sinking a ship. They don't seem to work, or they don't analogize very well to your lightning bolt, magic missile kind of spells. But there you start getting kind of stuff of military kind of application. Lorraine, I think there's a novel that asked about weather magic in a really interesting way, or maybe the answer of it to the question it asked was ultimately weather magic. But Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. And if you hate reading books, the BBC did a mini-series which is pretty good, okay? Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell is about, in the Napoleonic Wars, magic suddenly returns to England. It has been gone, and it returned. And there's some stuff that Susanna Clarke does that is wonderful in terms of being authentic to English magical literature and tradition. But the question arises, when England has two wizards after centuries of not having one, what should they do? And the answer is they go off to fight the war, and they use weather magic and illusions to enforce the blockade against Napoleon. And when Arthur Wellesley, the future Duke of Wellington, goes down to fight the Peninsular Campaign in Spain and Portugal, and he's got a wizard there, and the wizard says, what do you want? He says, I want good roads. And so, the wizard's spells consist of reshaping the terrain so the army can march fast everywhere it goes.
Awesome. Quiana, do you want to add to that, or go in a different direction to that?
I think that's like really spot on. I think it's good. Yeah. We can move on to another question.
Okay. Now, just one, maybe a different caveat to that. In my Face Taker series, my historical fantasy thrillers, they have a different kind of magic, and their magic draws from the power of human souls, which is really cool. But I tied it in. I started using different types of runes, which is something that there's a long history, in quite a few different cultures. Some of the stuff I was looking at was Celtic and other areas, and a lot of people believe in the power of runes even today, and they tattoo them on them, and you can have runes that mean all kinds of different things for health or strength, or power in battle or protection, or there's all kinds of different symbols that mean all kinds of different things. And so I incorporated some of that into that series, as well as a way that they could mark these runes on them and draw either from the power of their soul or other souls that they've either captured or committed to the process. And I've had people ask me like, oh, do you tie in this aspect of Celtic runes? And no, I didn't. I didn't try to be super authentic because I wanted to create something new. But I pulled in bits and pieces from a lot of those different cultures and traditions. And I think it resonates with a lot of people because there's still that feeling that you can draw those influences into your life through different runes or tattoos or other things. I don't know if either one of you have seen any of that, in your research or reading. Was kind of one way that you could, tie some of this stuff into a society or a magic system.
That stuff in terms of you're talking about tattoos specifically?
Yeah, tattoos or runes or symbols of power, things like that.
Yeah, for sure. It's interesting. So our word magic comes from the Greek mageia, which literally means what the magoi do. The magoi are the fire worshipping priests of Persia. So what our word magic originally means is the religion of those other people. And so often symbols, and you get into socioeconomic divides here, right? What we, the upper class, what the middle class do is religion. What the slave class does is magic. What the foreigners do is magic. So often magic symbols are symbols stolen across cultural or socioeconomic boundaries.
Sure.
A name that is just purely a name written down or even pronounced in another language, if I repeat it over and over again, or write it down, in an astrological pattern, becomes a talisman of power, or somebody else's sacred symbol, becomes my summoning pentacle.
Sure. It's interesting. I've seen some of those symbols. You might see them as a Celtic symbol, but either that same symbol or variations of that same symbol you could find in ancient Egypt or ancient China, or different parts of Europe. Before they became, when they were tribes and other things. And it's really fascinating to see how some of these symbols can kind of travel culture to culture and either have similar meanings or different meanings. And, some of them have been adopted into different religions. And people don't like to look back and see where some of these symbols came from because it might make you uncomfortable. It's like, oh, this sacred symbol used to be used by pagans or, totally different religions and things. It's fascinating to look into that.
Yeah, you were talking about how socioeconomic statuses affect how we see magic, and always a really good thing to consider in your stories, because who has access to magic in your story, and how are people with magic perceived, especially if magic is only available to a small amount of people, and how does the world treat them because of their magic. Because there's a wide variety of things that can happen there. You can be there's a chance that you could be discriminated because of your magic, because of because of other tensions. There's a chance that if you are born with magic, you're going to automatically be in a better social and economic place than other people. And it's going to be totally different if everyone has the same access to magic, because then what will be controlled can't be the magic itself, because everyone has it, right? So what's going to be controlled is the access to the information, the ability to grow that magic, because magic is power, and a lot of real world magic is it's debatable, and it often works differently than how it would in than how authors use it in a fantasy setting.
Sure.
And I say debatable really loosely, but you have people who are really adamant that, oh, magic isn't real, or this is what I do isn't magic, it's my religion. It's it's very soft. And there's a variance of different beliefs on how tangible that magic is, I guess. But if you have a system where there is no debating how powerful the magic is and what it can do, if you have kids who are born who can just shoot fire out of their hands, it's not really debatable whether or not the kid can shoot fire out of its hands, or if he's a magical being. And yeah, people are going to take it totally differently. So yeah, if you have magic in your story, it's going to be affected by class by some way, and there's always people who are going to exploit it to get power, whether that means suppressing other people and making sure they don't get it, or finding a way to make sure they and have the most of it, if that makes any sense. So
absolutely. Yeah. One of the things as we were talking about that came to mind, I'm thinking about, when we think of magic, especially in fantasy, a lot of times we're thinking about the world-threatening magic, the firestorms and the shaking entire continents and the big magic, because it makes for really gripping tales. But is there a difference in either perhaps how it affects your society or its acceptance? Say, for example, you had very weak magic. that was widely accessible? What would that do to your society? Or, that may tie into some of the stuff that you research, Dave, how different societies have accepted magic that's not, going to threaten the political system. But is there a correlation between how magic's used and how powerful it is versus how widely accessible it is? I don't know if either of you have considered that.
Well, weak magic that is widely accessible is Earth. It's what you're talking about right now. So I will tell you a couple of stories. Okay. It is a mistake to think that magic was a thing people did 200 years ago, and it is gone now. One, a very big name writer who I will not name because it's his story, not mine, was sort of famously building his house a couple years ago. And when the water company came up to sink a well, and this is literally, I think, 2 to 4 years ago, they had a dowser do it. That was it. That guy stripped out a forked hazel rod and wrote characters on it and went around and said, "Here it is," boom, and they sank, and sure enough, water. So people are still doing that today. Now it's not like a giant. No one's like, "Oh no, the Soviet missiles have launched. Put up the shield, wizards of Harvard," right? Right. I'll tell you another story. My co-writer for The Cunning Man and the Jupiter Knife, Aaron Michael Ritchie, this is his story, and so he should tell it, but he's not here. His parents, this is last year, wanted to sell their house, and they were having a hard time selling the house. And his mom said, "Listen, here's what you got to do. You got to take this statue of St. Joseph, and you got to bury it head down in the garden, and here's this prayer to say." And Aaron said, "What are you talking about? That's a spell, Mom." And she says, "No, it's not a spell, it's just a prayer. But make sure to bury the statue of Joseph head down, all the way underground, and then say this prayer." So Aaron went and did it. The house sold. They forgot to pull the statue out before they moved out. So after the close, after dark, Aaron and his daughter snuck back into the backyard to dig up the statue of St. Joseph they left buried in the garden. So look, people are practicing spells all around you. And sometimes they're doing things like that they would say, "Oh, it's not a spell. It's my lucky charm, or it's a prayer," or whatever. But sometimes it's full-on stuff that we would just say it's magic, and it is still happening. So I think the answer to the question is, what happens if magic is widely distributed and low power? Is everyone uses it? It colors things that happen all the time. Probably either it basically cancels each other out, or people, when they sort of succeed, feel that they were lucky and their magic worked, and when they failed, somebody blocked me with bigger magic, or for whatever reason. You can always explain why your magic didn't work. So I think the answer to your question, what does it look like, widely distributed low power magic, is what that looks like. It's Earth.
And then I think you just have to decide, how is your society going to either embrace it or marginalize it or treat it, because we have examples of that all across the world right now. Different societies deal with that kind of existing magic in different ways. It's either, a heathen, horrible thing, you burn them at the stake, or, you go see the shaman, or you call the dowser guy, or, different societies have very different ideas on how to treat the occult, or something you can't explain with a calculator, I guess. So, Quiana, you can comment on what Dave just said, or I can bring up the next question. Either way.
Well, I was thinking about magic that is available to available to everyone, right? And the first thing that I thought of was is social media, because it's gotten to the point where just about everyone has access to instantaneous communication and and information, right? And I think that it's something to keep in mind when everyone has access to a certain form of magic, is how it's going to be abused, and how it's going to be completely screwed up because everyone is using it. Because one of the big disadvantages that everyone has access to all information all the time is that you've been on Facebook, what that's like. And there's and it's especially interesting because we've been able to see like people who normally wouldn't have had any power are suddenly gaining a lot more power. And I feel like it would have been a lot different if this is how society had always been, you know? And I think it's a good contrast to the smaller religious magics that we have like going on, where it's like that's kind of always been there. I can't think of a single like time in history where people didn't have religion or magic or something like that. But yeah, like, is magic a new thing in your world? Is it old? How have people dealt with it? So yeah.
Great questions. Before we jump on to the next comment, I just want to remind folks we're at about 30 minutes in, so we got about 20 minutes left, I think. So if there are any questions, if we could get those questions, that would be helpful, and we'll just take them as they come. Otherwise, we'll just keep talking because we can go all day.
We could.
So Dave, I don't know if you have any follow-up comment to what Quiana was talking about, or we'll just keep rolling.
I do have a couple.
I think social media is arguably a blight and a curse. So if that's magic, I think it's wicked magic, and I'm opposed.
All right, I think
Totally fair.
I think we just had a question. Is that correct?
Yes, we have some questions from the comments. The first one is from Bookmark Dunn. What jobs would you three personally take if you were wizards?
Can you repeat that one more time, please?
What jobs would you personally take if you were wizards?
Who wants to go first?
Well, like, it depends on the kind of wizard. Like, are we talking about a more traditional wizard that has a more intense version of the magic that's generally practiced, that DJ has been talking about? Or is it, like, you know, is it magic or wizardry from, like, a Brandon Sanderson book? Like, there's a lot of different options there. Do I just get to pick?
So, yeah, pick one. What would you like to be?
Dude, I'd like to be, honestly, like, illusion or flight or transportation magic really fascinates me. I think that would be really fun. Probably illusion magic, because I'd still be able to tell stories and be able to tell them the way that I want to tell them, and it fits in with what I'm already doing. Transportation magic would be fun for, like, personal, like, use. It would be fun to get places, but it would get really boring if it was a job, like just being a delivery person. So
what do you think, Dave?
I would be, I think, either a secret agent or a priest. I think understanding the hidden connections. The word occult just means hidden. That's all it is. The occult is understanding the relationships among things, so that you can act on one thing and cause an effect elsewhere. I think that's at the heart of. I think being a priest puts you in a position where you could help a lot of people with all kinds of problems, from like possessions to depression to joblessness, and I think being a wizard at the same time can make you a pretty awesome priest. But I also think the same thing is true of a secret agent. I think I'm not sure I generally would want to work for the CIA, but I think it'd be pretty sweet to be a CIA wizard.
That would be cool.
that would be really cool.
That would be cool. My initial thought that came to me was it'd be cool to be the alchemy wizard, I guess, where you could take something and transform it into gold, and then you would kind of crash the whole world economy. So that would be kind of interesting. I think the question of what wizard you want to be is similar in a lot of ways to the question of what superhero do you want to be, because a lot of superheroes have basically magical powers. And I think it would be a blast to be Aquaman, because he's got the enhanced abilities and everything, but then he can go hang out in the ocean and explore where nobody else can go, and that would be super fun. And go expand our knowledge into a whole lot of unknown areas. So I guess I'll go with that. Call me Aquaman.
That'd be
Sweet.
sweet.
That was a good question. Do we have another question?
Yes, Stanley asked, what would be a good day job for a wizard who didn't know that he was a wizard?
A wizard who doesn't know he's a wizard? So I guess the question would be, if they don't know they're a wizard, are they practicing magic without realizing it?
I think like a palm reader or like a psychic, I think would be really good, especially if that person thinks that they're not actually talented, but that it's, people enjoy what they have to say and they are super accurate, but they don't realize that's what they're doing. I don't know. I think that would be fun.
Okay.
I think a wizard who didn't realize it would probably end up being something like a pimp. You'd be a fixer. You'd be hooking people up with stuff that they were looking for, and you would know the secret connections to be able to do it. Or a gun runner.
Mm-hmm. All good ideas. Another idea I had is if they were in business, they could be super successful, or like a stock trader.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you could just sense where stocks were going, there'd be no stopping you there. So that would be kind of cool. Or if you think about, a lot of fantasy is tied around, battles and conflict. If you have a soldier who's got magical abilities and doesn't know it, but they become the hero by default, that could be interesting because they're unstoppable and they just don't know why. They just think they're all that. Excellent question. We got any more?
Lorraine asks, so how would it work for the weather wizard? Presumably it affects the weather of the whole area. Do they get paid by the whole community, or do all the farmers in the area reap the benefits of what their neighbor paid for?
Yeah, or what if the neighbor wants something different? This is why weather wizards are going to be the first ones regulated, because it just won't work to have them have effect.
Yeah, I feel like
private employee.
Yeah, I feel like whoever has the most money controls the weather and the weather wizard. So, like, I feel like in a situation like that, the people who are rich are just going to get a lot richer, and the people who are poor are going to get a lot poorer because they can't afford to regulate the weather. And the people who are rich are just hiring the weather wizard to dry out their crops or drown them.
And then you can make a really cool story about a rogue weather wizard trying to change the status quo and getting hunted
Would be
by,
awesome.
CIA magicians who are trying to keep the status quo in place.
That would be super cool.
Yeah, that could make.
I would read a book like that.
Somebody go write that. I want to read it.
I'm gonna actually write that down. I hope everyone's okay with that. I don't know if I'll ever use it.
Everyone would do a different take on it, so go for it.
I think they can't hear it. I think they're basically experiencing the chat. I think we're like,
Excellent questions. We'd love another one.
So Stanley asks, if a wizard is an IT guy, what's the magical equivalent of turning it off and on again?
That's a short story prompt right there. I think he has to kill himself.
But then turning it back on again is the tricky part.
That's what necromancers are for, right? Like, you just have necromancers.
Yeah, I guess that could work. But it's interesting, in my Petrolist series, like I said, they've got those magic users who can, turn on different stone powers, and they're developing all this cool stuff, and they start developing, these communications between different stones and stuff through these powers. And one of their jobs is to go in and kind of resync some of these where their magic kind of is focused wrong. They have to come in and fix them and stuff. So you got your magical handyman in there to do the kind of stuff that an IT person would have to do today. So things always break. You design a perfect product and someone designs a better idiot. So there's always a way to break it.